Hi there, friend, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marissa, and I spent a good 30 years of my life stuck in survival mode to the point where I thought living in a constant state of stress, overwhelm, and anxiety was just normal. And by the time I hit my mid-30s, I'd been living in fight or flight mode for so long that it had completely distorted my sense of reality. There's a quote by Deepak Chopra that goes, "Awakening is not changing who you are, but discarding who you are not." And it took me way too long to figure out that most of my struggles were rooted in daily habits, both big and small, that had been quietly wrecking my nervous system for years without me even realizing it. And it wasn't until I started my healing journey and began reading books and connecting with people who held a mirror up to my life that I realized being stuck in survival mode 24/7 wasn't normal, and also that I didn't have to continue living that way. So that's why in today's video, I wanted to share 8 toxic habits I quit to heal my nervous system and go from surviving to thriving and feeling safer in my body, mind, and life, in the hopes that they might help or inspire you to break free as well. Let's dive in. Toxic habit number 1 on this list is ruminating over the past. And I think that it is so interesting that the word ruminate comes from a Latin word that translates to chew the cud. And for those of you who don't know, chewing the cud refers to cows and how they chew and chew and chew and chew the same mouthful over and over and over again, and sometimes swallow it and bring it back up to keep chewing and chewing and chewing and chewing. And that is exactly what ruminating feels like when you just get so stuck in your mind, chewing and chewing and chewing the same thoughts over and over again. And typically they're toxic or negative thoughts. Constantly replaying the past and reliving conversations, regretting mistakes, and overanalyzing every little thing that I'd ever said or done. And interestingly, research on rumination has found that repetitive negative thinking like this activates the amygdala, which is our brain's fear center. And in the long term, this kind of mental looping is strongly associated with all sorts of physical and mental health risks. Everything from anxiety and depression to insomnia and a weakened immune system. And for some people, it may even cause them to withdraw from social interactions, causing an increased sense of loneliness and isolation. One idea that's really helped me overcome rumination over the years is this idea called the spotlight effect. And basically, this is a psychological phenomenon that states that most people are overestimating how much other people are paying attention to them, because in reality, other people are actually way more focused on paying attention to what's happening in their own lives and feeling self-conscious about their actions and mistakes and whatnot. So whenever I catch myself falling into a downward spiral of rumination, I either remind myself of the spotlight effect and let go of those feelings, or I use some of the other techniques that I'm going to be talking about a little bit later in this video. The next toxic habit that I had to quit on this list was getting triggered too easily. And when I say that I had to quit this habit, what I mean is that it's an ongoing process for me to try to continue to heal my triggers and work through them and quit getting triggered so easily every single day. And I think that there's probably a lot of misunderstandings about triggers and what triggers are. So basically, a trigger goes way beyond just being uncomfortable. And in psychology, it means experiencing a strong emotional reaction, often negative, to a stimulus that evokes memories or associations of past traumatic events or experiences. And triggers can manifest in emotions such as fear, shock, or anger, or they can even manifest in physical reactions, such as sometimes when I'm feeling triggered, I'll feel a tightness in my throat, or I'll feel a surge of adrenaline through my body, or sometimes I'll have tears spring up into my eyes. So I'm sure you could understand how having a very obvious physical reaction like this could be really embarrassing and cause a lot of discomfort when you're out in public, adding to the discomfort that you already feel by being triggered. So one example that I can think of for this is I used to work in the mall and find jewelry right next to the makeup and perfume department. And sometimes I would smell a certain perfume that's called White Diamonds perfume. And whenever I would smell that perfume while I was working there, I would just feel these tears spring up uncontrollably in my eyes because it reminded me of my mother who passed away when I was 9 years old from cancer, because that was her signature scent. Can you see? Can you see? Just talking about it is triggering for me because I have so much repressed trauma. It's an ongoing healing process. And something that probably exacerbated the problem was that my father, who was this tattooed Harley Davidson riding tough guy, would always get mad at me when I would be upset and want to talk about my mom, and basically avoid the topic altogether and tell me to suck it up and stop crying, which made me feel very weak and pathetic for having these feelings. But then when I went to college and I started reading more and learning more about psychology and began my healing journey, I learned that being triggered easily doesn't mean that I have a personality flaw or that I'm weak or pathetic. It was just more a symptom of my dysregulated nervous system. And becoming a mom myself was actually one of my biggest motivations to heal, because one day I saw a quote that was like a splash of cold water on my face, and it said, "If you never heal what hurt you, you'll bleed on people who didn't cut you." And that hit me hard because I no longer wanted those invisible scars from my past traumas to affect my current reality. And so over time, I've become much, much better at identifying and being mindful of my triggers. And then when I find myself being triggered, I'll implement the mindfulness and self-soothing and self-regulation techniques that I've learned over the years through things like therapy and reading self-help books, and just the experience of implementing these things into my day-to-day life. And speaking of which, that brings us to number 3 on this list, which is that I had to learn how to overcome my poor breathing habits. Breathing is one of those things that most of us take for granted because it's just something that our body does, and it sounds so simple, right? But then when I went to college and I was studying to become a speech language pathologist, I realized that I actually had terrible breathing habits. First of all, I had really poor posture, and a lot of times I would slump over and have my shoulders scrunched down. And then on top of that, instead of breathing into my belly like I should have been, I was breathing into my chest, which meant that my breaths were much more fast and shallow than they should have been. And the thing about shallow, rapid breathing is that it signals to our body that we're in danger, which keeps us in fight or flight mode. But when we slow our breaths, especially with long exhales, we activate the parasympathetic nervous system, which is our body's built-in rest and restore setting. And that helps us calm down and get out of that feeling of fight or flight mode. This is something that I spent years learning about as a student, something that I taught to my own patients when I worked as a speech language pathologist, and also something that I've put into practice myself. And I personally find it to be one of the most effective tools for combating my stress and anxiety and helping me calm down when I feel triggered. And that's why I'm so excited to have Aura as the sponsor of today's video and to share them with you, because they have been an absolute game changer for my journey to heal my nervous system. Aura is an award-winning mindfulness and sleep app that's used by over 8 million people. And what makes it so special is that it's not just another meditation app, it's an all-in-one platform for your mental wellness. With Aura, you get access to thousands of resources all in one place, including meditations, breath work, sleep tracks, hypnosis, life coaching, and even short sessions from real therapists. So there's no need to juggle and pay for 5 different apps, because Aura puts those all at your fingertips in one place. And another thing that I really love about the Aura app is that I can use their smart filters to sort their breathwork exercises by length so that I can always find what I'm looking for and take as much time as I need to breathe and calm down, no matter if that takes me 4 minutes or 45 minutes. So, if you're also on a healing journey and you're looking for ways to be more calm, centered, and supported, be sure and go check out Aura using the special link in my description. And the first 500 people to sign up will get a free trial plus 25% off their subscription. So, like I said, be sure to check the description box and pinned comment below for that special link. And thanks again to Aura for sponsoring today's video. Well, the sun came out a little bit more, and my neighbor decided that meant it was time to mow his lawn, which I'm not sure is a good idea when it's wet, but who am I to tell someone when to mow their lawn? So we had to relocate to my living room, and I figured that now might be a good time to ask that if you're enjoying this video or finding my content helpful or inspiring or valuable, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel so that you can tune in every week for realistic tips and ideas on how to simplify your way to a happier, richer, and all around better life. With that being said, let's dive into the fourth toxic habit I quit on this list, which is skipping out on meals. I struggled with emotional eating for a long time. And back when I was in my early 20s, when I would find myself stress eating too much food and then afterwards feeling guilty and heavy and sick, what I would then do most of the time was then I would try to skip meals to make up for eating that huge quantity of food all at once. And I guess that in my head, I thought that I was resetting, but what I was really doing was punishing myself. And instead of that having the intended effect of helping me eat healthier and get my management of overeating back on track, in reality, what it did was reduce my energy levels, cause me to have these mood swings and feel irritable all the time. And then because I was depriving myself, that deprivation and scarcity mindset actually caused my cravings for those foods that I was deeming bad or unhealthy to increase, which then turned into a vicious cycle of skipping meals and overeating, then going back to skipping meals again. But after years of therapy and reading self-help books about emotional eating, I was able to break out of that cycle by getting back in tune with my body and its hunger cues, as well as by swapping out healthier coping mechanisms when I feel the urge to stress eat. And since then, I realized that skipping meals is actually one of the biggest triggers that causes me to overeat. So I make sure to always eat my meals on time. And if I catch myself stress eating or eating a little bit more than I meant to, I still won't skip a meal. And instead, I'll just eat smaller portions that still leave me feeling satisfied. And not only has that done wonders for my peace of mind, but I was also able to lose the weight that I'd packed on from all of that stress eating. Next up, number 5, we have the habit of drinking too much caffeine. I used to drink a lot of caffeine, and I would have 4 to 6 cups of black coffee in the morning, followed by a cup or two of black tea in the afternoon. And I didn't think much of it until I started to notice how jittery, irritable, and overstimulated I would feel as the day wore on. A few years ago, my husband and I experimented with cutting coffee out completely after reading a study about the potential negative side effects of coffee. And within days, I found that my anxiety dropped significantly and my memory and overall attention also improved. Over time, we did decide to add coffee back into our morning routine, but now I limit myself to 1 or 2 cups in the morning and never drink anything with caffeine in it after lunch. Not even black or green tea. What I'll do is I'll stick to peppermint or something like chamomile tea in the afternoon instead. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm trying to put you off drinking coffee entirely, because studies have found that there are positive benefits to drinking small doses of coffee, such as increased focus and feeling refreshed. And I think the key point here is that anything can be bad for you in excess, and small doses of caffeine might actually be beneficial. So it's all about being able to pay attention to your own body and your mind and knowing when you've had too much. Number 6 on this list is not having good routines. Back when my life was at its messiest and most chaotic, one of the things that really held me back was not having good daily, weekly, and monthly routines. And one of the things that really drove this point home for me was becoming a mom, because becoming a mom helped me see how sacred my children's nap time was. And if they didn't get into a good nap time routine and we didn't stick to that routine, then they were going to end up miserable and not be able to sleep and be crying a lot. And then that in turn was going to make me miserable. So we had to get into good routines for them. And then that in turn taught me how important it was to have routines around things like sleep, doing the laundry, meal planning, and getting enough exercise. Studies have found that regular habits and routines can help regulate the body's natural rhythms and responses, which promotes a sense of calm and balance throughout your day. Good routines are less about having a perfect schedule and more about providing structure and predictability throughout your day, which can lead to reduced stress, improved physical and mental health, and increased productivity. The seventh toxic habit I quit was living with too much clutter. I might be a minimalist now, but I used to be an emotional hoarder who thought that collecting and holding on to things as long as possible wasn't just normal, but also practical. Because that was the way my dad and a lot of my loved ones thought and lived their entire lives. And looking back, it's no wonder that my family and I have struggled with things like anxiety, substance abuse, insomnia, and depression for so long, because studies have found that people, particularly women, who live in messy or cluttered homes have increased levels of the stress hormone cortisol, which can lead to all sorts of negative physical and mental health side effects. Nowadays, my home and life look completely unrecognizable to what it did back then, but I'm so grateful to the me of almost 10 years ago who was able to push through the pain of decluttering and let go of my past, as well as all of the clutter that was holding me back, to create more space for the things that matter most to me and the rest of my family. Decluttering my space has helped me breathe easier, focus better, and feel lighter. And even small changes like tidying the entryway or clearing out your nightstand drawer can reduce visual noise and create more calm. So here's a gentle reminder that your environment impacts your inner state, so decluttering is like self-care for your nervous system. And finally, that brings us to number 8, which is spending without intention. I used to buy so many things just because they were cute or because I saw that they were on sale and I didn't want to miss out on a good deal. But decluttering my entire home and the 30 years of stuff that I had in it really opened my eyes as to just how many of those must-have purchases ended up as unwanted clutter and wasted money. So nowadays, I'm much more intentional with how I spend my money and what I bring into my home. And I use questions like, do I need this? Do I have space for this in my home? And is this purchase aligned with my values and priorities, as a filter to help me cut back on impulse purchases? And if you want to find out more about that and hear my favorite tips and ideas to save money by cutting back on impulse spending, be sure and go check out one of these videos that YouTube thinks that you'll like, or I'll see you next week. Until then, take care. Bye-bye.